Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, here with Sam. How you doing, Sam?
What up? I am doing well. I am not recording this episode from a hotel room, relying on hotel Wi-Fi. You are.
That's true.
Let's hope that goes well for you. First of all, hope it's a satisfying and relaxing vacation for you. I know you're. I'm not going to disclose your location, but should I disclose the
I can see the beach.
The environment? Yeah, okay.
Right now,
I can at least say that
see the beach.
You can see the beach from where you are. And so far, we were just talking to each other a couple minutes before we hit the record button here. We can hear each other.
Yep.
So this should hopefully work out well. But yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, full disclosure to everyone listening. I think we only talked about this on a Patreon podcast. But the plan was I'm going on vacation. It's the last week before training camp. We'll be fine. Nothing's going to happen. Everything will be great. In fact, we'll record an episode early because nothing's going to be happening around that time. And then, of course, as we were getting ready to record an episode early that we would normally release on this day, we just can't. There's too much. You know, we held out thinking maybe something would happen and we'd have the opportunity to cover whatever happened. Nothing has happened, but there's still a lot to talk about that feels urgent enough that we needed to wait to release the episode on the same day that we're recording. And of course, what we're referring to is that every grifter, every gabber, every reporter is in a frenzy.
Every gumbo
is in a frenzy talking about the fact that DeAndre Ayton is connected to whatever Damian Lillard trade happens, essentially. And that, of course, is with the main caveat being the only name mentioned for the Suns so far with any credibility in my mind, and that is Yusuf Nurkic coming back to the Phoenix Suns.
Don't you mean
briefly
Nusif Jerkic? Actually, is Jerkic, would that be pronounced with a hard J or a soft J, do you think, in Slavic cultures?
Yeah, could it be Jurkic?
It could be. That could be a Jurkic.
It's probably Jurkic. Yeah, it feels a little closer somehow. Yeah, and yeah, it's a situation now where technically we don't have much to talk about, but I think we have yet to talk about it on this feed. Just even how we feel about it, what it means, and I think in even some ways we should cover kind of how we even got to where we are right now a little bit, right?
Yeah, sure. I think we've certainly covered the how we've gotten here portion of this before.
Of the DeAndre Ayton side, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, recently our friend Dan Favale actually just had us on his podcast, Hardwood Knocks. It's an NBA podcast to do a Suns preview. And, we kind of talked about this, but just DeAndre Ayton's regression last season. And there was a time in DeAndre Ayton's career when, notably like after the finals run or even maybe a little bit afterwards, so like 2 years ago, when he had really become a solid defensive anchor and a guy that you could seriously count on to be like 95th percentile, like really good as a rebounder and just really, really solid as a defender. And we were hoping at that point, for instance, when we did our internal development episodes, that he could tack on other offensive skills besides that. The most concerning thing over the past 2 years has been that he's just regressed. The stuff that he was good at, he is, if you look at the statistics last year, he was significantly worse at. So how did we get here? We are at the point now where, call it what you want. If it's a degradation in the relationship between him and Monty Williams, or if it's just that, fighting with the Suns FO about the max contract beef from a couple of years ago. Who knows exactly why it is, but there is a case to be made, I think, for some people that this is a relationship that is past the point of repair. And that there is an addition by subtraction case that could be made in DeAndre, getting rid of DeAndre Ayton, essentially. I'm not necessarily going that far myself, because to be honest, I don't believe that it would be addition by subtraction. And the name Yusuf Nurkic by itself doesn't appeal to me. But really, certain, and this is the part we talked about on Patreon, so we're going to have to retread this conversation a little bit, but certain packages you could build around Yusuf Nurkic, you could absolutely talk me into it. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and from the Suns side of it, regardless of what DeAndre Ayton was last year, if you're looking going forward this coming season, there's a really easy way to talk yourself into DeAndre Ayton plus Frank Vogel equals championship if you're the type of person that has a high level of confidence in him, or just a high level of blame that you put on Monty Williams, I guess. Or
Chris
Paul, solution
for that matter, by the way, who was another factor we had mentioned in the past, and some people have mentioned.
Right. Or Landry Shamet. Maybe it was Shamet's fault. We can't rule that out. But if you're the type of person that says the reason DeAndre Ayton becomes disengaged throughout the time that he's here in Phoenix is a lack of shot attempts, I don't think you can reconcile that with this current team, because Chris Paul, regardless of how you feel about him as a player, was the person that was allowing DeAndre Ayton to shoot as much as possible. Had the most, in fact, it was one of the highest assist duos in the entire NBA, and you're replacing him with a player in Bradley Beal who is a good passer, but nowhere near as willing and nowhere near as effective. He needs to shoot more in order to score, which means DeAndre Ayton is now knocked down one more peg in the pecking order when it comes to shot attempts. So from the Suns' perspective, they're probably looking at this entire situation and saying, do we want to pay a man $30 million to be the center on this team when we're asking him to play maybe not like a $30 million player? And the types of things that we need him to do, the types of things we're asking him to do, are the things that he does not necessarily want to do. He wants the ball more. He wants to take more shots. That's everything we heard throughout his free agency last year. Now, when, of course, the Suns want him to be defensive anchor and rebounding presence, screener, roller, yada, yada, yada. Now, a lot of you are listening to this and going, well, that's not Nurkic either. And I agree with you. And I think that's where the conversation becomes about what else is involved here. Because the Suns can't, first of all, they wouldn't trade. And I don't even think the Portland Trailblazers have the cap space to even do this. But they wouldn't trade 1-for-1 DeAndre Ayton for Yusuf Nurkic.
Yeah, it can't happen.
In fact, if that could have been done by now, it would be. You could just do it. There's clearly more involved here. So the question for the Suns is, what else is involved if this trade does go down? Because Nurkic, I mentioned it on Twitter, the way I describe him is he's a tax, right? This is a contract that is higher than his value as a player because he's often injured. And even though he's good, and I think has a good impact on the Portland Trailblazers when he plays, a pretty high impact by all net rating statistics, because of his injury history, the length of the contract, the overall amount of that contract, makes it a negative deal.
Yeah.
So if you're taking a negative deal, the implication of taking a negative deal throughout the history of the NBA is that they're providing something of value with him in order to pay you for taking that deal. Now, that second question of what that something of value is the entire question of the trade for me.
I don't think it's okay. It can be the entire question of the trade for you. I don't think it's the entire question for a lot of people. I was going to say that's usually the way it works when you trade a negative for a positive, but if you're trading a negative asset for a negative asset, it becomes a little bit more complicated.
The difference is dramatic, though. I agree that DeAndre Ayton is overpaid for what he provided. Look, in his first year as a max player, he was not a max player. He was an average center on the aggregate. At times really great, at times really bad, but on the aggregate probably average in his first year, and that's not what a max player is. But he's young, he plays a lot more games and has a much higher ceiling, and that, as much as maybe the Suns don't need to factor that in when thinking about a championship, or maybe they do, depending on how you feel, that has to be factored in when coming to the value of his overall contract, right?
Sure. Yeah, it is. The big question I want to ask you here about Nurkic, though, because I think a lot of people are thinking this as well. We could talk about what else you tack onto the trade, whether it's the OG Ananobis or the Caleb Martins or the Nazir Littles in the worst of cases, whatever that other piece may. That, by the way, would be a horrible, horrible trade. But it's a name that I don't know, technically Portland has on their roster, right? There are a lot of people who I think would come around and tell you, well, no matter who that other piece is, I'm not interested in depth right now, because there are people who just firmly believe that you can't win a championship with Yusuf Nurkic as your starting center, or you can't win a championship with Yusuf Nurkic missing 40 games next season and then Drew Eubanks becomes your starting center. What do you have to say to those people specifically? Because I do think that's maybe a concern that's worth addressing.
Well, I think that in some cases they may be right. I do think that the Suns team, that doubting the talent of the top three guys at this point is difficult to do. I think you can build a lot of versions of a championship team around three all-stars that are good on and off the ball. And this iteration of this team is unlike anything we've seen in the NBA. I think I can't make any one-to-one comparison between the combo of Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant and any other team in the history of the NBA.
It's certainly not. It's certainly not the Brooklyn Nets, which some people, the naysayers would have you believe, that
including Nurkic,
including Nurkic, which whatever,
who tweeted, "This is the Brooklyn situation all over again" when Bradley Beal was traded to the Suns.
Right. Well, that right there might be a case against him. Maybe he has such low basketball IQ as to not understand the off-ball impact of Devin Booker and Bradley Beal compared to Kyrie Irving and James Harden.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's hard to say, but I think that I think that if you ask a lot of those people, Jeff Fisher chimed in today, as I mentioned, all of the newsbreakers or the non-Shamshiranian, non-Woj newsbreakers are out there trying to attach their name to this, even though we on this podcast know that it was Dropping Dimes 21st that said anything about this, and he was not just first, weeks and weeks before anybody else when it comes to what's happening and coming out at this point. But Jake Fisher came out and said Toronto could be involved in a Portland trade, which, by the way, I am still skeptical of, but I'm not ruling it out entirely. And that if they were involved in that trade, maybe OG Anunoby can come to the Suns. Now, if you ask a lot of those people who say you can't win a championship with Yusuf Nurkic as your center, can you do it with OG Anunoby? Would be my next question to them.
As your center?
Yusuf Nurkic. And then Yusuf Nurkic. And then OG Anunoby, right, by the way, can play forward and KD can play center, or even OG could guard some centers in small ball lineups as well.
Well, let me just be totally clear. If you're in the position of you would say no to a theoretical trade, like this to me is a best case scenario. If you would say no to DeAndre Ayton for Yusuf Nurkic and OG Anunoby, you are crazy to me.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
so that's why I mean the secondary part of this trade is what dictates whether it's a good trade or not. Because and by the way, it's not OG Anunoby or bust for me in order to judge this as a potential good deal. If you're sort of deciding that you're giving up a clear starter for this team in DeAndre Ayton, you have to have a clear starter coming back. Now, Nurkic, of course, is a clear starter on this team as currently constructed, but in the 30 games, 40 games that he misses in the season and maybe the playoffs, there has to be another clear starter. Somebody better than the four guys that we're going to talk about at the end of this episode. Sorry to say it, but Keita Bates-Diop, Watanabe, in some cases, Eric Gordon. You have to have somebody that is a clear tier above those players, in my opinion. And, specifically in fit, because I think fit is the most important thing on championship teams, not just talent, but fit, in order for this to make sense. Now, we can throw names at you. We can. But do we need to, Sam? I don't know. Like with
well,
OG,
it depends.
of course we do OG and Anunoby. I just think I just don't really understand why Portland would want DeAndre Ayton more than OG Anunoby when they could potentially just trade for OG Anunoby and then
Right.
trade OG Anunoby to another team for like 3 more picks or whatever they want.
Right.
When the Suns don't have any to offer.
Yeah. So the other guy that is on Toronto's roster that I'm not sure if we've mentioned yet, at least not publicly, he makes the same salary tier as Anunoby, is Gary Trent Jr. I think Toronto would be much happier to get rid of Gary Trent Jr.
Of course, yeah.
than Anunoby, as Trent Jr. We know what his archetype is. Arguably, his archetype is the same as the one we already have filled by Eric Gordon. It's an offensive sharpshooter, shoot first, ask questions later type of guy.
No pass, no passing.
No passing, but a guy who averaged...
I believe he had the most, what was the name of the, Kevin Martin's last year.
Did he?
Gary Trent
Did
Jr.,
he?
which
I
is,
think
Kevin
it's
Martin. Guards with 20-plus points and 0 assists.
Yes.
Guards with 20-plus points
We
and 0
we
assists.
trademarked that stat last year. Kevin Martin, 20 points, 0 assists.
From a
I
guard.
totally
Yeah.
believe, from a guard, yes. I totally believe that Gary Trent would have led the league in that statistic.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that doesn't do anything for me because we have Eric Gordon. But he
It's
is
a good player.
He
a
is
bad
technically better than
Yeah.
the wings that you mentioned. He's better than
Yeah.
Watanabe. He's better than
Yeah.
Bates Diop, obviously. But he doesn't do anything to add to this core that we've already assembled with 3 really solid shooting guards, essentially.
Yeah,
in
we're
Booker, Beal,
talking
and
about
Gordon.
turning DeAndre Ayton's $30 whatever million into 2 $15 million players, essentially, right? And of course they could make more. In fact, by the way, trading DeAndre Ayton, if they're going to trade him now before next offseason when the rules to trade players become even more limited, if they're planning on trading him, I could see why the urgency is now, because it becomes harder and harder with the limitations that come next year, which include not being able to aggregate players, which, I mean, if the difference between making a good DeAndre Ayton trade is including Ish Wainwright in the
What is
trade.
with you and some of these names today?
I'm on vacation. I got vacation break.
Yeah, that's fair.
If it means including Ish Wainwright in the trade, and you can't do that next year, you should have done it this year. That's the kind of limitation that we're looking at. The Suns, because they're over the second apron, after this season, in next offseason, they can't add additional players in a trade. They can trade 1 player for multiple players, but they can't send 2 players out in a deal. It becomes incredibly limiting to make moves. So if they want to trade, they should probably look to make trades now.
The only other name that I guess has been going around is Caleb Martin. That would be, of course, if Lillard gets his preferred destination of going to the Miami Heat. Does not make $15 million for the record. I think he's more around like 6-7. But would be, I don't know, I kind of view as the median option between
He's
like
really good.
a disaster
He was
scenario.
so good in the playoffs.
Yeah, he's not Anunoby good, but he was very good in the playoffs. Of course, you always worry a little bit, in my opinion, with guys who just stake their claim to fame on a single playoff run, which is basically, Caleb Martin has been a solid
especially
role player.
Miami Heat guys who do that, by the way.
Yes,
and
of
not
course.
just any guys, but the Heat always have guys that just they pick off the scrap heap and then are amazing in the playoffs.
I'm just saying, let's wait 2 months and see how Max Strus is doing. And where did he sign? Cleveland. Let's see how that works out for them.
That's true.
So I don't know, but yeah, Caleb Martin's been a
Gabe
decent
Vincent,
role player
yeah.
for years. But honestly, in the past, I would say he was probably at around the level of a Keita Bates-Diop, and then just shot so far ahead of those guys in terms of his reputation, just based on this one playoff run where, yes, he was fantastic. He was their third best player.
He was good in the season too.
He was.
He was good in the playoffs, but he was also really good in the regular season on a good team.
Yeah, I mean, what did he average though? He averaged his 9 points and 4 rebounds and played defense and hit corner threes. Like he did what he was supposed to do.
Yeah,
is that making a major difference? I guess it gives you a guy who could be a clear-cut 5th starter. You've really solidified your starting lineup there if it's him and Nurkic, and there are no questions about the 5th guy anymore. You have a more solidified bench unit.
Yeah, the thing that was concerning to me, I think his offense, I think you could make the case, for the record, if we're just talking about Caleb Martin real quick. And since we are recording a main feed podcast segment about this, we can assume a trade will be announced immediately after this episode is uploaded. But if we're going to talk about Caleb Martin real quick, I think you can make a case that he has one of, if not the best contracts in the NBA at this point.
Right now, yes.
Because
he signed a 3-year deal.
Yes, he signed, and it was a taxpayer MLE, I believe.
2-year deal, excuse me.
Yes, so I think he only has 1 year left. Yeah, but he's way underpaid for what he brings to a team. His value is well beyond what he's paid, and as soon as he's eligible for a contract or contract extension, if Matt Ishbia is willing to put up or shut up, then he's going to make a lot more, which becomes, of course, more limiting if the Suns end up trying to re-sign him, but he's definitely more valuable than what he brought. I was personally concerned, and we talked about this in the past about his defense, but our friend Dan Favale, who of course covers the entire NBA and probably watched more overall Miami Heat games than you and I were able to watch, really kind of made an effort to talk us into his defense as well, which kind of made me more excited about that potential. So I'm not mad at that one. I do think salary-wise, the Suns would even need one more player in order to match DeAndre Ayton's salary. And then maybe in that case, they send Ish Wainwright out as well, and then probably would have to cut another player. Now, who that other player would be probably would be dependent on what kind of player they get back. I think with Yusuf Nurkic coming back, you could make the case that if this were to happen, the Suns need all the center depth they can have, and maybe it wouldn't be Bol and as easy as it would have been before, because now they need more center depth, and maybe they have to make a more complicated decision at that point.
There is still a roster spot open, correct? So they might be able to take in a 3-for-2 trade. Am I wrong about that? I don't have the roster in front of me.
No, I don't think there is, because didn't they trade campaign just to sign Bol?
They traded campaign to sign Bol, but then they signed Ish, and now they have 14 players. They still have 14 players.
Okay, if that's the case, then that makes it much easier.
Someone correct me if I'm
you're
wrong.
Including Kamara?
Fuck.
Yeah.
Fuck, you're right. They do not. Yep.
Because Kamara signed a full deal, and they have two. I think you can have 3 two-way slots now, and the Suns could potentially. I don't think they can change Kamara into a two-way at this point.
No. Okay. You're right. They would need to cut an extra player. That's my bad.
And they don't really have players they can trade, except for, by the way, you could say this, but Booker, KD, and Bradley Beal are like the only trade eligible guys they have
until
they end up sending
December
out DeAndre
15th,
and Ish Wainwright. Yeah,
right, because everyone else.
So they have to cut someone, eat the salary. You can carry more players in the off season than into the regular season. That includes through training camp, so it's not like an urgent thing. They can have these guys compete for a spot in training camp, and then Matt Ishbia would just have to eat a little bit of money to cut one of them, and. It's just, or they find a way to send out 3 guys in somehow, some way that I wasn't aware of. Maybe there is some possible way, but as of right now, we're looking at nothing has happened yet. But the noise is loud, and I think when Gambo starts chiming in the way that he does, it feels like maybe something won't happen. And by the way, what an awkward media day that would create. But if nothing happens, then it does kind of feel like we were being prepped for something to happen, and then it just didn't, somehow fell apart or something, right?
Yes. Look, you're talking about media day. It's been awkward with DeAndre Ayton for years. I think he's handled the situation fairly well, honestly, but
last year was funny. He was so mad. He said he was going to be revengeful and then had his worst season in years.
There's been smoke.
Of course.
For 24 months.
They've tried to trade him more than once, yeah.
So what do we expect at this point? If it's another media day like that.
We just get awkward media days every year. That's what we get.
It won't even be that awkward. They can throw Bradley Beal out there and have him, he'll be the shiny new toy for the media to talk to, and all will be fine.
That's true.
I'll be happy regardless of what happens. I mean, I feel good about the roster as it is right now, to be honest. But I also am not one of these people who's opposed to a trade, not whatsoever. So that's
kind of how I feel too. I'm not excited about Nurkic. There are many versions of a trade that would excite me. But right now I'm not anxious for a trade in a way that I was probably at the beginning of the offseason.
I'll reiterate what I said on the Patreon, which is I am slightly curious about if you brought in Nurkic, your ability to turn him into Brook Lopez and have him shoot 10 threes a game, because he did shoot the ball well from 3 last year in a limited role of doing that for Portland. That would intrigue me just from a spacing perspective. But overall, Nurkic or no Nurkic, the Suns are bargaining, in my opinion, from a position of strength. So I wouldn't be nervous. I don't think people should be.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say is even if nothing...
You seem to be questioning that. You seem to think we are in a position of weakness, which
I think that it's... The one thing I'll say is I think it's pretty clear that if DeAndre Ayton is on the team past training camp, it's not with the intention of keeping them forever, no matter what. I just think the clock is ticking at this point. And
I think we already
from
knew
the Suns'
that.
perspective, if they're but the more desperate the Suns seem, the less they're going to get back in a trade. And I mentioned that ticking clock being next off season. So I think even if he goes into the season this season, hate to say it for those who are big, huge fans of his, which I have been at times, and at times I am not. And at this moment, I would say I am not. But for those who are, I wouldn't buy a jersey yet, unless you're willing to wear a throwback. That's what I would say. Anything else on that?
Oh, I think you stomped on the hearts of some Ayton fans. Are we going to break and then? Let's go. Let's do it. What we intended to do in this episode in the beginning. Let's do a nice long segment of external development. Now the story of an NBA team that traded everything and the one thing that could keep them all together. It's external development. All right, we have done Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and then we snuck in an internal development of Devin Booker because I just didn't want to do this whole series without talking about Devin Booker. It's too fun. It's too fun to talk about Devin Booker. And now we have role players. Now we could, of course, do a DeAndre Ayton episode that's internal development. I think we can skip that. In fact, I recommend if you really want to hear it, go back and listen to last year. Most of the conversation is the same, other than the fact that we really praised his previous season. So now we have the players that we settled on that we wanted to do, and we're going to fly through them because we can't do them at the same pace as previous episodes. That's Eric Gordon, Keita Bates-Diop, Yuta Watanabe, and Drew Eubanks, right? But could you imagine if we found an audience for an hour-long episode on Yuta Watanabe, all of his strengths and weaknesses? Those would be some insane listeners. So I think we're... I think it's a good thing. This is going to be probably 10 or 15-minute quick hitters on each of these guys, and then we can move on.
Which guy do you want to start with?
Let's start with... You want to start with Drew Eubanks?
Sure.
In our conversation, because we were just talking about Ayton, so I think Eubanks is very relevant to the Suns' success this year, just as how steady can he be with everything else going on. But also, you seem to be in our conversation with Dan the other day, really high on Drew Eubanks. Do you want to start with talking about that?
I think if you look at all of the bench, and this is including Eric Gordon, there are two players that could start on teams, and those two players are Eric Gordon and Drew Eubanks. Now, whether Drew Eubanks would be a top 15 starting center, of course, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But in the right role, with the right team, maybe even including 3 All-Stars offensively, I think Drew Eubanks could be an effective starting center on certain types of teams, and that includes the Suns in the games, like whether it's DeAndre Ayton on this team and the games that he tends to miss every year. Not a lot, but, players get injured. I think Drew Eubanks would be perfectly acceptable in that role. Or if it's Nurkic on this team and there's 30 games where you need another player to start or something like that, then I think Drew Eubanks would be perfectly acceptable in those roles as well. When I think about who he is as a player right now, and we watched a lot, well, I did, I'm sure you did as well, but a lot of film on him when he was signed onto the Suns initially, the first thing I think of, honestly, is probably screens, which is not overly exciting, right? There's a reason we're doing 10 minutes on these guys instead of really long segments, but like a really great screener, capable of moving off the ball, mostly a screen and roll player, not somebody who's going to be overly creative offensively. But I think in the NBA, when you have a center, understanding their role and playing within that role as well as possible, in most cases, is one of the most important things. And I think he's a center who's perfectly capable of doing that.
Yeah, he nails all of the basic big man stuff. Screening, he's really high in terms of his screen assists, where he ranks out compared to other guys. And then offensive rebounding and rim protection. Like, he's not a Biyombo level rim protector, but he's still a really good rim protector, and he comes with all of these offensive strengths, or at least offensive like baseline capabilities that a guy like Bismack, as much as I love Bismack and his contributions the past couple years with the Suns, just could not provide. It was a total negative on offense in a way that Eubanks won't be. So yeah, the question is kind of comparison I was thinking of as you were talking about the role that he could play is like, could he have his Kevon Looney moment? Not that he would be a good starting center, but could he technically be slotted next to several all-stars and do all of the dirty work? And, could we see a successful team or successful situation come out of that? I think the answer is absolutely yes. I don't know how I would rank him next to, I think I like him more just based on the film I've seen. I think I like him more than Jock Landale.
Yeah.
I can't say that with a 100% level of certainty, though.
Yeah, Landale was really good.
Which is also weird. It's also weird because Jock got paid like $8 million a year, and Eubanks came here for the
Suns made him some money. The Suns made him some money. I probably could have made him more in the playoffs had he played more. But he's a good backup center. James Jones every year since he's been the general manager just signs a different skilled white big man to come off the bench every single offseason, and this is the guy he signed this year. And look, so far so good. Every time he does it, he's found good players. Aaron Baines, Dario Saric. Frank Kaminsky had his moment.
Yes.
And Jock Landale, and now we got Drew Eubanks, and I think there's a pretty clear indication of what James Jones is looking for in these guys, and that's players that understand their role and are pretty skilled. And I think with Eubanks, and I posted a clip of these passes that I found in watching him last year, the thing that James Jones was looking for is a player who could be effective at finding passes in the short roll. And I think Portland is a good team to watch film for when looking for centers who can make the read in the short roll, because Damian Lillard is the only effective offensive player, or the obvious high tier above other offensive players on that team. And because he can shoot.
Yeah. Anthony Simons is an effective offensive player, but even him,
you're not going to trap him the way you trap Lillard.
You could, but
Grant.
My point is their entire offense is their backcourt. 90% of their offense is their backcourt. Whether you include Simons in that conversation or not, definitely most of the attention is directed towards Lillard, and they don't have a high level pick and roll finisher to create the classic 2-man guard big man game.
Well, plus they're trapping Lillard 35 feet out. So obviously there's a ton of space for these big men to make moves in. And for the Trailblazers, they need players who are effective in doing that. And Eubanks. So there's a lot of film. You can watch a lot of film of these guys doing it because of the amount that Lillard is trapped. And Eubanks makes good reads. He makes smart reads. He can pass to cutters, bounce passes over defenders. He can pass to shooters. And the reads are fast. It doesn't take him a second to process. He's making the moves pretty quickly. And for the Suns, I think it's clear that he needs to be able to do that. Now, will it be harder to trap these guys because there's other all-stars on the team? Yes and no. I think in some ways just slowing down the offense is the goal of the other teams when trapping, and that means forcing the ball to the center a little bit more than the Suns would prefer to do it. And so that means that Eubanks will probably have the opportunity to do that. And when he does roll and get to the rim, he shoots 75% in the restricted area and 50% in the paint outside of the restricted area. Not quite DeAndre numbers as far as efficiency, but not that far away from what Ayton was doing last season. So pretty effective when he does need to score at the rim.
And certainly as capable as DeAndre Ayton is at dribbling the ball.
Right, which is not very.
Which means not very, but we know that
Eubanks can't.
We know that isn't one of Ayton's strengths either. So, I mean, it's not like you could just sub out Eubanks and bring in Ayton, plop him at the 18-foot hash mark, have him catch in the short roll and attack the rim. We've always begged for him to do that, and he doesn't do it. So Eubanks can.
But Eubanks will catch a body though. He's not afraid of the guys jumping at the rim.
Poster dunks. He does have. Some,
and he has some highlight blocks as well. The dude can jump. He's got springs. He gets up there, throws it down hard, and gets some good blocks. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to get to see from him on the Suns as well. Depending on, there's just so much more spacing on this team than there was previously, and I think centers can have a lot more space, a lot more leeway. To do good things. And I think you brought up I don't have the rim protection numbers, but they're incredibly good for him.
11 contests at the rim per 75 possessions. For comparison, DeAndre Ayton was at 6.3. This is from B-Ball Index. So basically contesting almost double the number of shots on a per possession basis as DeAndre Ayton, which right there I think speaks for itself in terms of effort. but also held opponents to 6% below their expected averages at the rim. For Ayton, that stat was 3%. He was holding players 3% below their averages. So he was just a better rim protector than DeAndre Ayton all around. Again, not like Biyombo level numbers, but very good numbers. So I think he'll impress. Before we wrap this conversation up on him and move on to the next guy, let's just quickly, what's one thing that concerns you about Eubanks?
When it comes to the internal development, external development, the thing that he needs to do in order to fix this team, the thing that I'll be watching him early, is right now he's a drop defender pretty exclusively, and his ability to contest at the rim, because of his springiness, often ends with him chasing guys to the rim. It's not necessarily moving feet to stay in front of guys. So for him, what I'd like to see is how effective he can be at moving in space on defense. Is he going to be great, like an all-star type defender or something? No, he's not. Can he improve from where he was last year? Probably, with better team defense around him, because I think the Suns will have a much better team defense than the Portland Trailblazers had, that's for sure. I think he could be put in a better position defensively with somebody like Frank Vogel pulling the strings. And then the question is, I think there's a case to be made that the Suns have a roster full of players who cannot switch big men. So that means DeAndre Ayton's not going to be switching onto the perimeter. Drew Eubanks is not going to be switching onto the perimeter. Bol, Metu. Maybe Metu. Actually, in some cases, could.
Maybe Bol.
Of all the centers, maybe Metu.
Probably
we
not
know
Bol
is one of the worst perimeter defenders in the NBA, according to B-Ball Index.
Yeah, but this time might be different.
That's true. That's a good point. I can't say that.
You
he's got Frank Vogel now.
You can't
maybe we should feed him the ball more.
Can't argue with that.
But you look at Eubanks, and my question for him is, scheme-wise, can he be more versatile? Because if he can, I mean, he could play 20 minutes a game, if he can become a versatile defender.
I mean,
because offensively, I'm not worried about him. I think he knows his role and will play it well.
He can for sure play that many minutes because, look, the Blazers were awful for the past 2 years, no doubt. But he literally has already done it. He played a combined 50-ish games as a starter the past 2 seasons for Portland. He's done it. He's been doing it. Now, they lost a lot of those games. They probably
where they were way better with Nurkic. Like, the numbers were just way better with
But
Nurkic. But
also, a lot of those games where he started were at the end of seasons where it wasn't just Nurkic
That's
who was
a good
out.
point.
They were also shutting down Damian Lillard.
It's really hard to look at Trailblazer stats and understand that because of they were such a mess for years.
Yeah, for at least the past 2 years, they just weren't putting those players in a position to succeed. But also, I'll finish off here. Sneakily, Eubanks is one of the youngest players on this roster, which is now a relatively old roster. He's been in the NBA for years, of course, but he's 26.
He's got room.
He's 26 years old. DeAndre Ayton is what? He's 25?
Yeah, something like that.
So if we're talking about, if you're holding on to hope that DeAndre Ayton can improve in year 6, I think you should at least extend the same possibility to Drew Eubanks, who's about the same age and maybe entering the prime of his career.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the confidence side of this conversation, as far as what he will improve and how good he will be, I think regardless of how I feel about the individual parts of his game, I think Suns fans are just going to really like him. I think he's going to be a really high-effort guy. And when it comes to players Suns fans have liked in the past, I think of P.J. Tucker, I think of Mikal Bridges, and I think Drew Eubanks is going to fit in that type of role. Maybe not as defensively minded, but high effort from a big man.
He is pretty defensively minded.
You're right.
When was the last time Suns fans hated our backup center? Like, to be honest, backup center is probably one of the easier roles to ingratiate yourself to a fan base, because I'm not even defending DeAndre Ayton here so much, but there is a certain, it's easy to fall out of favor with the fans when you're the starting center, and then the backup comes in for 15 minutes and their role is just to play high effort. We've seen so many of those guys over the years now. You mentioned Aaron Baines had a kick-ass season with the Suns. Jock Landale just did well. Dario Saric was a different type of center, but well-liked, I think. Rashawn Holmes kicked ass. Basically, every player who has ever backed up DeAndre Ayton, I think, was more or less well-liked by Suns fans, and I have a feeling Eubanks is going to continue the trend.
A massage chair might seem a bit extravagant, especially these days. 8 different settings, adjustable intensity, Plus, it's heated, and it just feels so good. Yes, a massage chair might seem a bit extravagant, but when it can come with a car, suddenly it seems quite practical. The all-new 2025 Volkswagen Tiguan, packed with premium features like available massaging front seats, it only feels extravagant.
Okay, who should we talk about next? We got Eric Gordon, Keita Bates-Diop, Yuta Watanabe.
You had me choose first, so you go ahead.
Okay, I say let's just talk about Eric Gordon.
All right.
I think that this is kind of the guy that we don't need to necessarily explain to people a lot. But, you know, in this entire conversation, we can set some level of expectations on who these guys are and what we can expect, and then refer back to these conversations over the course of the next year. That's why I think it's important for people who really like this podcast to listen to these episodes, because we will reference them, and Eric Gordon is a guy that we can reference back. Now, who he is, we've been talking about a lot. In fact, I recommend, if you haven't listened, go back and listen to our episode with Shane Young, Secret Suns fan, if you ask me. Don't tell him I said that. But he had a lot to say about Eric Gordon and his fit on the Suns, and I think this is it's pretty clear on what he is. He's a shooter, likes to shoot really far away. I think that's the main place we can start, but I'll let you go on who Eric Gordon is to you and expand on that.
Yeah, going to be the sixth man for this team. If you ask me, you might say you want to start him still. It's just that might be your pipe dream. I'm sorry to say, Mike.
I know it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen
unless there's some weird trade that comes down here, and then we'll see. But
right,
yeah.
But is going to be maybe if he plays well enough on the other side of the ball, and I think that's where we'll finish this conversation. But could end up being our go-to closer, just through the value that he brings as a floor spacer, bombs threes, takes some of the deepest threes in the NBA. Also really underrated as a driver, which is a point that I keep stressing home. Do you want me real quick? Can I compare the drive statistics for Eric Gordon and Landry Shamet, who's the guy whose role he's really replacing?
Yes, absolutely.
Last year, because people think of Gordon as a pull-up three-point shooter, and to an extent a spot-up three-point shooter as well.
He's good at it.
He's good at it. Shamet's okay at that too. He's pretty good even. But when you compare the two in their driving statistics, Gordon last year averaged 9.5 drives per 36 minutes. Landry Shamet averaged 5.2. So already you're taking a guy, you're replacing all of Shamet's minutes with this other guy. We've talked a lot about how Bradley Beal is going to come in and provide more rim pressure for the Suns and how that's going to add to their offense. But we're neglecting to drive home the fact that Eric Gordon is also driving twice as often as Shamet. That's going to make a real impact for this offense. But then it's not just that. It's not just the frequency. It's also the efficiency, because Eric Gordon on all drives, all field goal attempts coming off of a drive last year. So this is not just shots at the rim. It's the short floaters. It's the stopping for a mid-range shot. He shot 51% on all attempts coming off a drive last season per NBA, the NBA's website. 51% is good in this stat. Landry Shamet shot 31% on his drives. 31%, Mike.
I know. I mentioned it. Devin Booker shot better from mid-range than Landry Shamet did at the rim.
Landry would have been better offense. And like it's just crazy to me because like philosophically on a basketball court, you want a guy who's as well-rounded as possible. You don't just want a guy who's catching and firing all the time. You want the threat the threat of the dribble, the ability to attack a closeout and create a better shot. But that stat right there implies that Landry Shamet literally would have played better offense all of last season if he just continued to chuck from three every single time. 100% of his field goal attempts were threes, whether they were contested or not. And that every time he dribbled the ball, he was actively hurting the Suns' offense. Which I think if you watch Landry Shamet from the eye test, shouldn't be that surprising to hear. But it's still sad that the stats back that up.
Yeah, Landry Shamet dribbling is effectively a turnover 70% of the time, basically. Because the combination of when he actually turns it over, but a missed shot, I mean, that's just... And also his inability to get assists, by the way, who Eric Gordon is a great passer
right,
as
because
well.
He doesn't have the gravity. He's not attracting the second man to the ball, which would open up those assist opportunities that maybe is going to happen more often. Not even maybe, will happen more often with a guy like Eric Gordon. And also, the 30% of the time where it's not a turnover for Landry Shamet, even if the shot goes up, I'm telling you, based on this field goal percentage, it's not good offense. It's not a good shot.
Right, exactly.
So the fact that Landry Shamet, we had to rely on that guy in the playoffs last year was so insane. And right there, you could have replaced him with anyone, and it would have been addition by subtraction.
Well,
But
if you ask Bill Simmons, if you replace him with Bradley Beal, it makes no difference.
Bill has had a lot of dumb takes over the years, but that one...
It's one of the dumbest I ever heard.
It's one of
we can't forget it.
One of the dumbest takes I've heard from Bill. And definitely the dumbest I heard all summer. Incredible. But the fact that you're replacing him with Eric Gordon is going to make a hell of a lot of difference.
It's a remarkable upgrade, and I think that comparison is apt because it really is role-wise. That's who he's replacing, and the upgrade is it's unfathomably huge with how bad Landry Shamet was last year. And I think if you look at Eric Gordon's stats last season as a whole, you might be like, "What? Why are they so excited about this?" Or whatever. But I think if you look at the difference just between Houston and LA alone, and that is 34% in Houston from 3 and 42% from LA. That looks incredible, and you might even say, wow, that must just be a coincidence. But then, if you look recently, there was some articles written about Houston's culture in the last few years tied to the Kevin Porter Jr. incident that happened recently, but the incidents that have happened over the years in Houston. And you start to realize the bigger picture is that Houston was a complete, absolute mess, and that Eric Gordon is desperate for some level of stability. And what we saw from him in Houston, where people thought his career was now going downhill, I think there might be a bigger story to that. I think he's a better player than people even realize at this point because that team was such a huge mess. Now, I don't want to say that the Bahamas are any indication of what these players can be in the NBA, but he was the best player on the Bahamas team, and that team included 2 other NBA players. And Eric Gordon was the clear leader and the clear offensive leader of that team. And I'm just so excited for what he can be and what he's going to be on this team. And I think he could be even better than we anticipated. The other thing, too, you might not think of him as a defender, but you're also not going to think of him as a bad defender. And I think that's something to be said. He's not tall. He has some level of a good wingspan. He's really strong.
He has a good level of good wingspan. 6'9".
Yeah.
6'9"
Yeah,
wingspan
it's
is
good.
like +5, +6 inches. It's a lot.
It's good when you're a guard.
He's
In
one
this
of those
team,
guys.
He'd be a forward, though. You know what I mean?
Sure. But he's one of those guys, I think, where the fact that he's so stout
Yes,
in his body
you can't
frame,
see it as much.
you can't see the wingspan like with a guy
Part of
like
the
Mikal
width
Bridges. Yeah.
is his chest, right?
Right.
And, he's kind of a bowling ball. That's what we've called him on this podcast a few times. And he's got the strength, but it's not just offensively when he's bumping into guys and using his physicality to finish at the rim. By the way, his finishing numbers over the years, amazing, especially for a guy who's his size. But he also uses that strength and that bowling ballness as a defender as well. He can guard bigger. He's a player who's capable of guarding forwards if he's tasked with guarding forwards, which he was when Houston was good. When they almost beat the Warriors. So yeah,
you're hitting on the internal development aspect here. So I just want to throw it out there of just the question I wrote: can he take on more challenging defensive assignments? Because that's going to be the make or break question for Eric Gordon that decides how many games he really can close. We know what he can do on offense, but to what you're speaking about, I think he can guard up. And he can guard some kind of more stout or stronger guards or even some forwards, some small forwards from time to time. But if he is put in a position where he has to take on primary defensive assignments, especially against the quicker guards, that's where he might get into trouble. And especially if he's closing a game where he's on the court at the same time as Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, it feels like probably among those 3 names, Devin Booker is going to be the guy who will have to handle the best guards out of those 3. Just
MVP
in terms of
season.
who he would start a possession on. And that's a lot. It's a lot to ask of Book.
Yeah.
So, how much is Gordon going to be targeted? If you try and close with him against like a Luka Doncic type player, I don't know. That remains to be seen.
The exact thing I wrote is in closing lineups, he will likely be guarding stars. And, maybe not against bad teams. You're right. Maybe not against a team that only has... Well, even then, if they only have 1 star point guard, it might still be Eric Gordon. It might not be Devin Booker in those cases, depending on how that team goes. So his defense will be tested on this team probably more than it has been in a long time.
Yeah, like
but the other thing is, we also don't really have. We do, but we also don't really have a backup point guard.
Right.
And he needs to kind of be that as well, especially if there are games where there's no Bradley Beal or there's no Devin Booker. If they miss a game or two here and there, Eric Gordon's importance as a playmaker is going to rise, and he's been good at that throughout his career, but he'll be asked to do it more on this team than he's done it in years.
If you're trying to close against the Warriors with your best offensive lineup and Gordon's on the floor, who's guarding Curry?
Right.
Who's guarding? I mean, this isn't a great team, but just as another example, like who would you have guard Trae Young? Like any type of guard matchup like that, I feel like we have to think about, because
it's going to be hard. Yeah.
If the answer is going to be Booker, that's tough for Booker.
It's tough.
But physically, it's going to be tough for Eric Gordon too. Maybe the answer is Bradley Beal. Maybe Beal has his best defensive season ever, and he's just totally reinvigorated by winning basketball again. But I'm not exactly holding my breath.
Beal's pretty good. Not to rehash the Beal episode, but he's pretty good on the ball. It's kind of off the ball where he struggled a little bit more, similar to Devin Booker. Confidence in whether or not Eric Gordon can do this role, pretty damn confident. We're asking Eric Gordon to be Eric Gordon on this team, right? We're not really asking him to be anything more than that.
We understand. I think we already understand that we got an awesome, totally capable, like mid-level-esque player for a minimum contract, which was a total steal, and I still can't believe they were able to pull it off. Can't ask anything more of the guy. Not at this stage.
I agree. I think that he is going to play as long as he remains healthy. I think he's going to play. I mean, you can make a case that if the Suns make a trade, DeAndre Ayton is gone. He's the fourth most important player on the team, regardless of who comes back, because of his ability to do more than one thing, and also the spacing that the Suns will have, which is more than they've probably ever had on this Suns team. Literally ever. Excited about Eric Gordon. All right. Let's move on. You get to pick the next one. You got two choices.
Yeah, I think let's go Watanabe here because Bates Diop feels like a good place to close.
Perfect. Yuta Watanabe. Who is he? What do you think?
Corner shooting.
Yeah.
The corner threes. No, I think we've thrown out that one statistic, and for anyone who still doesn't know it.
It's a good statistic.
I know. But we've thrown out this one statistic that last year Yuta Watanabe shot 50%, 52% on corner threes. So that's kind of the meme number for me now when I think about Watanabe, because I don't actually expect him to keep that up. It would be great if he could. But mostly I think of a guy who's already fostered a good relationship with Kevin Durant, who Durant vouched for and wanted the Suns to sign this offseason based on his history of hustling. Hey, he's another hustle player. He's not the most naturally gifted athlete out of all of the guys we signed. He doesn't have the wingspan, if we talk about that Bates Diop does, who just has like a totally freakish body. He doesn't have the greatest vertical. Like I don't think there's a lot of videos out there.
He's pretty athletic, actually.
He is, but he
can throw down on guys.
He's a well-rounded athlete who's not. I don't think he's really in the upper echelons of anything.
He's also been on the wrong end of one of the best posters I've ever seen.
I don't remember what you're talking about. Which one?
It's Anthony Edwards dunk, and it's brutal.
Okay, I'll have to look up that specific one. I can't remember. I mean, what can Yuta Watanabe do? He could do a little bit of everything. We watched him play this summer as well in Japan, and watching him play with that team sometimes frustrated me because he wasn't necessarily allowed.
He was asked to do a lot. Actually.
He was asked to do a lot, but he wasn't allowed to assert himself offensively in the way that I was hoping for.
Yeah, they didn't have any good point guards.
Not even one. Not a single good guard on that team. I think the positive thing that you could take out of that was we saw him playing a lot in the sort of similar spot-up role that he's going to play on the Suns. And we saw him playing out of like a lot of pick and pop situations and double drags. And, for me, it's going to be important that, yes, Yuta can shoot from the corner, hopefully, based on the statistic last year. But he needs to be as versatile as possible to justify his playing time on the court. And that means I need to see the evidence that he can shoot the ball above the break as well. Because if he can shoot the ball above the break, and to be clear, he did pretty well last year. He shot 37% above the break. But the more he can do it from everywhere around the perimeter is just going to increase the play calling versatility for Vogel or Kevin Young when he's on the floor. So like if he can play out of those double drag sets and really just be providing spacing for the offense and making the defense feel that spacing, that's going to pay huge dividends for our offense.
I think one of the main things you look at, because the cool thing about what the Suns did is they signed a bunch of role players that are essentially in their prime. But one of the things that you look at in Yuta's career is that he's gotten better every year, and he's consistently improving. And look, you might say, well, yeah, every NBA player does that when they're young. It's not true. A lot of them just end up out of the NBA. You have to improve when you're young in order to stay, and he improved enough to stay, and the Suns got him on a deal. With him, 44% total from three, over 50% from the corners, as we're going to continually mention. That will be tested. Not to fully jump into the next part of this conversation with him, but on his career before last year, he was 35% career from three, which is not the same. It's dramatically different. And so his ability to maintain that high percentage from three will have a large impact on his effectiveness here with the Suns. But when I watch him play and when I watch Kevin Durant talk about him, he absolutely nails it, which of course he does because he's a basketball genius, but he's just really good at moving around. He finds the right place. He's at the right place at the right time. And that means like skulking around at the three-point line and keeping passing lanes open for him to be available for a three-point shot. But it also means finding the best time to cut. It also means improvising and making himself available by relocating when the play no longer is the play, right? When the defense effectively stops it and now everyone's improvising, he's in the right place at the right time. That's not true of every NBA player, and you have to pay attention to see it, and he's good. And I think there's a reason KD likes to play with him as somebody who is an isolation type player. It's good to have a player that knows where to be at the right place at the right time. Now, to talk about what he needs to do on this team. Now, maintaining the three-point percentage is vital. I think it dictates whether or not that's a good contract. Look, it's a minimum
without
player,
that,
but
it's a minimum contract, so it's hard to really be super disappointed by any of these guys. But without the three-point shooting, if that doesn't stick, if he shoots 35% from deep this year, he needs to greatly improve at something else to be providing any sort of value. Because that's
if
his
he
one
shoots
strength.
35% and he's shooting 10 threes a game, okay,
yeah, I mean that's
it's fine.
But I'm saying if he's playing 15 minutes a game, which is what I'm expecting,
yes,
I'm expecting
it's 40% is what we're looking for here, right? 40% or above.
I'm looking at him as like our ninth man going into the season. Maybe he can work himself up in that depth chart, but he's on the outside looking in of this rotation for me personally.
Not to reiterate one of my bits about Yuta, but he's tall. He's taller than you think when you watch him play. He's basically 6'9" out there. And that's an important thing when it comes to his effectiveness on this team. It means he can play in big lineups. To have a shooter that's tall is really important. Teams need that kind of thing. He's closer to, you might think of him more like an Otto Porter than a traditional type of player that's just out there bombing threes. Tall players that shoot threes are important. But that means defensively. So when we get into how he can fit into this team, he's got to be capable defensively. Has he been capable throughout his career so far? Not really. Has he been terrible? No, not really either. I don't think the Suns really signed any terrible defensive players. Because when you're 6'9" and you have the ability of moving your feet pretty quickly, which he does, you can do a lot. But he's probably, if he's out there, he's probably going to be picked on. That means the Suns have to find a way to maximize his overall height and size defensively, then really force him out to the perimeter to chase around guys as much as possible. What do you think about his defense?
I think his defense is going to be okay. Actually, to be honest with you, I'm a little bit more worried. Not even worried, but I'm a little bit just more focusing on his offense for what he needs to improve on and how he can fit in with this core. Because you're right, he doesn't have the foot speed defensively, but I think he's displayed some of the versatility already. The number of positions that he can guard. That I'm not expecting too much of Yuta. I want to make that clear.
Well, if you're doing a switching defense with Yuta, and that means that he's going to be isolated on guards who are driving on him, well, then at least he's 6'9". there's just something about being tall that makes a difference. He might be the person when you watch games, his defense might stick out to you as, man, they're really attacking him a lot. But I think his size will make up for some of that defensively. At least that's the hope.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I feel like Cam Johnson, not the reason he got drafted because he was considered to be a really weak defender coming out of the draft, actually, but Cam Johnson improved positionally as a defender, but imagine how much more he would be struggling with some of his natural athletic deficits if he were 6'5" or 6'6" instead of the 6'9" power forward that he is.
Yes, I agree. Now, offensively, did you have other notes that you wanted to talk about with him?
Just that he needs to be ready to play with pace because they're going to leave him open 99 times out of 100. If he's sharing the floor, especially if it's in the second unit, a little bit different. But if he's sharing the floor for any reason with Beal, Booker, KD, you have to make the defense believe in your shot. Going into the season, they understand the percentages on the scouting report, but they're still going to leave him open. They're still going to double other guys. And then eventually when the closeouts do come, can he attack a closeout with any sort of familiarity or any sort of understanding of pace? Essentially, this is the stuff that we saw some light evidence of it on Team Japan, but I really would have liked to see more of just self-initiated drives from Yuta, taking the ball in and attacking the rim and finishing all the way. So, how much of that are we going to see from him this season? I really don't know. But given what you said earlier, he's improved a little bit every year. Hopefully the trend continues there too.
The thing about what the Suns did with these last two guys that we're going to talk about, Yuta, Keita Bates-Diop, is they signed guys on minimum deals who have had a small role and been good within that small role. You can make the case that Keita Bates-Diop had a pretty big role, but on a bad team.
Really bad team, so it's hard to say.
So it's going to change pretty dramatically. And now what that means is recontextualizing these guys, putting them on new teams and in new environments with new roles. If you nailed those signings in a way that the Suns could have done, being that they're still young and capable of improving, they could have had major steals on their hands with both of these guys. But we're talking about guys specifically in Yuta who played a low-minute role and whose role kind of diminished when they stopped trying to be great. And meaning they didn't really put the time and effort needed to try to improve him on the Nets after Kevin Durant was traded. So for him to be great on the Suns, he has to thrive in a higher minute, higher pressure role. And so I'm not casting any doubt on that. I think it's very possible he can be.
Sure.
But I'm saying that will dictate whether or not the Suns have these major steals that we're hoping they do. Because in small minutes, he was great. And if he can continue that, if that scales to a higher minute role, he's going to be awesome.
Just to compare to compare the two guys real briefly, and then we'll move on to Keita Bates-Diop. But, Keita Bates-Diop played well in his also small role with San Antonio last year. But again, different situation. Talk about a high-pressure role. It's a high-pressure role to perform next to Kevin Durant in any capacity. If you have any understanding at all about what stage of his career he's in and how much he wants to win and, all the other distractions just that were going on in Brooklyn's locker room, to be honest, I think Watanabe has already displayed a certain ability to perform under pressure that I think would translate really well to Phoenix. Bates-Diop, I think, is a more talented player, but I would say just the pressure performing aspect could be called into question a lot more with him.
Yes, I agree. And it'll be a challenge for both of them because for specifically for Yuta, it's about whether or not he can maintain that higher minute and see how well it scales. Now let's move on. We've already started talking about him with Keita Bates-Diop. Unless you have anything quick that you want to add on Yuta.
No. We'll finish.
Okay, cool. So Keita Bates-Diop it's funny because we compared these guys, but they're pretty damn different as players. They're not a lot alike other than they're essentially the same height, right?
They're very different in the way they play offensively too. Both sides,
even down to just Keita Bates-Diop being a better above the break 3-point shooter last season than he was a corner 3-point shooter. Even that's dramatically different than what Yuta was, which is a guy who thrives specifically in the corners. Keita Bates-Diop shorter, 6'8", but has a 7'3" wingspan, built like somebody who should be like a defensive player of the year type player, has not shown that yet, which we'll talk about soon. But I think the biggest difference in this last year with Keita Bates-Diop, the reason I think that so many people are looking at him as a potential steal and a great role player for the Suns is he shot overall 39% from three, when in the previous years of his career, they combined for 30%. So he's another player who had a dramatic increase in three-point attempts this last year in the Spurs, who was wide open a lot, and he probably still will be on the Suns, and capitalized in shooting a pretty high percentage for the Spurs, and that's why the Suns are signing him. A tall player, capable with a long wingspan, who shoots threes. That's like James Jones's favorite thing to have in Keita Bates-Diop. So that's, I think, when I think about him now and what he can be on the Suns, those are the first things that come to mind. I'm sure you agree.
Yes.
But do you have anything to add?
I mean, just that statistically, like this guy, so he's 28 now, but last season, his age 27 season, entered his prime and statistically started nailing every category. It's not just the fact that his 3-point percentage rocketed up, but like he doubled it. These are modest numbers, right? But like he doubled his assist rate to go from like 1 assist to 2 per game, improved, like doubled his free throw attempt rate. It's just all of the particular pressure points or barometers that you would want him to hit. Suddenly he was hitting. So he was a pretty well-rounded, honestly, offensive player last year. Just a guy who shot 51, 39, 79 for his overall splits. There wasn't an obvious weakness in his offensive game for a guy who you lay out the expectations, what they should be for him being like a 20-minute per game player.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right, like 68% in the restricted area. The thing about him is he doesn't really do anything outside of at the rim and from the three-point line.
Yeah, he's not a mid-range creator at all, but
that's
don't
fine.
want him to be.
Yes, exactly. That's what you kind of want out of a role player. Look, is it good when players can score from everywhere? Yes, but that means they're probably not getting them on a minimum deal. So if you can find a player who's tall and effective at the rim and from the three-point line, that's the right mix for a good role player. So yeah, maybe he won't be able to shoot from mid-range, but he does have a little bit of bully in him.
Yes.
That if he has the right matchup for a small guy, he's going to push him under the rim. He's going to bury them there, and he can shoot. He has a good finish at the rim. So, if they're switching when he screens for Beal, and now we have a point guard on Keita Bates-Diop, he's going to bury him under the rim. We're going to get some easy shots out of that.
Yeah, if you hide, because I brought his name up already 10 minutes ago, if you're the Hawks and you hide Trae Young on Keita Bates-Diop, that's a mismatch. That's actually going to be a problem. I'm really glad you brought it up, because Bates-Diop in the post last year scored 1.18 points per possession. That was at the 90th percentile. And Booker, for the record, was at 1.19 points per possession in the post. So he was actually sneakily, and this was not like his go-to play type, but it was something that he did like once per game. It wasn't something that he never did throughout the season.
It's not completely out of his bag.
No,
it's in there.
It's if he has a mismatch, you can go to it. So it's just a fun quirk in his offensive potential. That plus the cutting. He's just another smart cutter. I think this is something he does have in common with Yuta. But he has ways of getting to the rim even without being a particularly adept on-ball driver.
Yeah, if you put size on him, it might stifle him a little bit if he's driving with a defender on him, but you can't. You have to put that size on Kevin Durant if he starts, which is another reason why this guy is a potential starter for this team. Just you make the matchup so difficult for the coach of the other team, because let's just picture this again. I know we bring them up a lot when talking about defense, but the Dallas Mavericks, for example, what the hell are they going to do in defending the Suns? Say Keita Bates-Diop is in the starting lineup, which, by the way, probably our most, as far as body type, most effective type of defender that could potentially guard Luka Doncic. So you're probably going to start Keita Bates-Diop if you do match up against them. I know there's a chance that Luka or Kyrie Irving are being hidden on Keita Bates-Diop, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not, because otherwise they're guarding Beal or Booker.
First of all, what the hell is Dallas's starting lineup that we're into? Who's their starting center this year? Is it going to be JaVale? Is it going to be Rashawn Holmes? Is it going to be
Powell? Probably
Powell.
I think it's Powell.
It's
Yeah.
Powell? Okay.
So you're starting Powell. You have Grant Williams. Grant Williams is going to be guarding Kevin Durant. So now you have...
Okay, that's already insane. They're already toast. I'm sorry. Grant Williams is guarding Kevin
Their
Durant.
offense is going to be good, though, too. The Suns have to match up against them
Tim Hardaway
defensively.
Jr. Is Josh Green going to start this year?
Probably. So let's say Josh Green's on Booker. Right? So now you have the choice of putting...
Or maybe they do like Luka on Booker and Josh Green on Beal. And then, Kyrie goes on
Keita Bates Diop.
That's a mismatch.
Yeah, I know. Makes no sense.
Yep.
And your best option is, put Luka on him. Sure. Now Luka is helping off of him or whatever. And now you can cut. You can find other ways to score. The size mismatch is just off. And he's an effective screener. Outside of DeAndre Ayton, he's an effective screener as well. So now you have a complicated situation where if you try to hide a defender on him, it's not like when you're hiding a defender on Josh Okogie. This is a 6'8" player who can roll to the rim as a screen and roll threat. It's just different. It's a really smart signing for the Suns, and I think it's fair if some people are going, why are they so excited about Keita Bates Diop? He was a terrible team last year. Okay, fine. Yeah, okay. But we're talking about, once again, taking these players out of the situation they were in and putting them in a potential situation where their role is more perfectly suited for what they're good at. And I think that this is a great, great example of if it goes right, it's going to go right in a pretty dramatic way. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about his offensive skills. I have made it known on this podcast that I am slightly more skeptical of his defense than maybe a lot of people are. In fact, I don't think he can guard point guards, so we'll start there. He can't guard a point guard. You start a game against, most point guards, you can't just put him on him. You can't put him on Trae Young or Steph Curry or whatever. You just can't. He's not capable of moving fast enough to do that. Can he switch occasionally? Yeah, I think you probably are fine with a guy that's 6'8" with a 7'3" wingspan switching. But the other part is, this lineup is so huge when you're putting him in the starting lineup, it makes up for a lot. Defensively, when you can't move your feet, if you just have a lot of guys protecting the rim, a lot of guys contesting with long arms, it just makes up for a lot.
It's true.
And so defensively,
every mistimed rotation is going to be made. You could render that mistake like less important a lot more easily just by virtue of the fact that every guy has more inches that they're making up for with their length, right? So
trying like a regular person couldn't make a pass on a team with size and length like that. You can't even pass it. Just passing lanes will be hard to find when you have size and length. So I do think that the on-ball stuff with him, on-ball defense, I'm still a little bit concerned. Like, if we do have to put him on Luka Doncic for a long period of time, I don't think that's a great matchup for us. I think that he's going to get abused in that.
I'd still like to see it.
He's also still young.
Did you watch
improve.
him? Did you watch him in a particular matchup last year on ball that like really scared you? That you were like, yeah, he just can't handle this player, this body type.
No, you know what? Maybe I should look at just how they played the Mavs, for example.
That might be.
I just watched a lot of possessions just going on to the matchup data in
sure
on the NBA website, looking at the B-ball index data. Yeah, that's a good point because there could be a lot more there than we're seeing. Because look, I'm going to admit it right now. I didn't spend a lot of time watching the Spurs last year at all. In fact, I didn't enjoy it even when I was forced to. So, yeah, I don't have a ton of info just based on my eye test. And I'm curious what you think, though. What do you think about his defense?
No, I mean, I kind of would still like to start the season out giving him the toughest assignments possible.
And seeing how it goes?
Yes, because I think, to be honest, I think you can still win those games regardless of how that goes, just with the sheer talent of this team. But more importantly, I think it's important to conserve as much energy as possible for our main guys. Let's see what he's capable of, and then we backtrack if we have to backtrack. But I
don't hate it.
But I don't know. I also need to go back. I think the Mavs would be a good example to your point of let's see how he can handle a Luka. Because he's kind of a wiry frame as well. And yeah, I mean, someone with that combination of strength and also burst when he needs it could be like the perfect combination to give him a lot of trouble for sure. It's going to be hard to shoot over him though. Like, just taking step back threes over Keita Bates Diop with his Bridges-esque wingspan is not going to be easy. Any way you slice it.
I agree with that. Let me see if I can take a look while we're talking to see if we have a lot of possessions of him even guarding Luka Doncic, because I'm curious about that now.
You know, the NBA's website might let you down right now. I saw that they were, I don't know, I was trying to look up some stuff recently, and I think they reset some filters. It was hard to find data from last season all of a sudden.
Okay, well, just from the perspective of who he is and what he can be, I think in general, when you're asking him to guard a lot, it's more likely he can guard up positionally than he can guard down positionally. And this is not to say that you shouldn't test the limits of that. I think it's fair, just like you said, to actually test that to see if that's true. But just from the perspective of what we've seen and what he's capable of doing, I think in the past that's just more likely that he's more capable of that. So.
Sure. We're certainly going to experiment. I mean, Vogel has been asked about this directly, and I think every interview he's given at every point of the offseason, and he's been very direct about he's excited to experiment.
And I don't see any possessions. There are possessions of him guarding players. I don't see any of him guarding Luka when I look this up. It's possible it was just Devin Vassell the whole time.
Yeah, Vassell or
yeah,
it would definitely be Vassell on the Spurs, right? Keldon Johnson probably wouldn't have.
Johnson is the other option. That team should have been better than they are when we list the players that are on it, right?
I don't know, man.
they just don't have the offensive engine.
Vassell is too young. Keldon Johnson is, yes, they don't have the offensive engine. That was a big thing, but Keldon Johnson is kind of mediocre. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he's a winning player. Sorry to use that trope, but
yeah, I think if you look at Keita Bates-Diop, just if you start from the perspective of this is our backup power forward, then you got a great player as a backup power forward. Now, just talk about the confidence level of who he is. If you look at him as a starting forward in a lineup that the Suns have, I think there are questions, but the upside of what it could be is incredibly high. And I think it's worth it to try to test it just as you talk about.
This is your Caleb Martin potential guy right here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about Caleb Martin was until he blew up with the Heat in the playoffs. Keita Bates-Diop absolutely has the talent to make that sort of impact. And then leave the Suns when he signs for $10 to $15 million elsewhere. But, you know, at least we would wave him goodbye and say job well done, and hopefully he would have a championship ring to boot.
Yeah. That's true. And I think that's all I got on Keita Bates-Diop. Do you have any other notes that you want to make?
We're not doing Bol in this episode, I guess. We decided against that. That's okay.
I think that we picked the 4 players we know for sure will be on the team beyond training camp.
And are reasonably sure.
And Bol probably will.
And the 4 guys,
probably will.
To be clear, we're reasonably certain will be in the opening day rotation somewhere. You know, they might be 8th, 9th type players.
Yeah.
But there was no point in covering Bol. Damian Lee would have been an internal development episode. Chimezie Metu was the other big one, I guess.
And maybe he'll be something I don't see yet. I've talked about that with Dan Favali, but I don't get Metu yet, and I'm interested to see what the Suns are seeing in him.
Yep. And then Jordan Goodwin, obviously the other candidate. I think he is also on the outside looking in of the rotation. I could totally see him playing an important role for the Suns at certain points this year.
I agree.
But I don't think it was clear enough for us to make that case right now. So these
even Bol, as much as Sam likes to say I hate him, I think that he just won't play a big role in this team. Roll. And I do think that
I fucking hate you.
I do think that he's a perfectly fine signing at the end of your bench who could maybe even turn into something better because he's still young. And what they did with him and who he is and his position on this team is fine. As long as he's happy with that, which, by the way, in some cases, there's rumors that he wasn't happy with his role on previous teams, and they were bad, those teams, other than the Nuggets, then I don't know. I think it could be a fine situation with Bol, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they use him and if they end up using him a lot. But if we have situations where one center is out, I think Bol can end up playing a lot of minutes at center as backup center. And that could be fun, to be honest. And I'm excited to see what that ends up being. But that's all we got. Now that we are about to post an episode, which I will go as fast as I can in posting this episode, maybe there will be a trade today. Right?
Nothing has happened yet. Don't worry.
I was just going to ask you if you've been checking. I haven't checked.
Yeah, I refreshed.
Okay, so nothing yet. I will be as available as I can be on this vacation, Sam. I'll make that promise to you. The plan is no Patreon episode this week.
Yep.
But if there ends up being a trade, if something does end up happening, as soon as both of us are free, I think we can say that we will record to analyze it if there is a trade, right?
I am also going to be on vacation starting Wednesday, and we'll also be traveling. But yep, we're taking all our gear. Or at least, you don't have your gear, do you? What are you recording with right now?
No, I brought it all.
Okay.
I wasn't planning on it, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it.
I was like, no wonder he sounds so good. Why doesn't he sound like he's wearing AirPods right now?
Yeah.
No, I'll be taking all my gear, and if anything happens, we'll be good to go.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back as early as next week. Well, as early as an hour from now. Yeah. But definitely next week. So thank you, everyone, for listening. By the way, our next episode will be about Media Day, which hope it's not a circus at this point, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like. But thanks, everyone. Back soon.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.